Okay,
Yeah, I'm off here, then move it here.
welcome to this City Planning Committee meeting. I'll let everybody know that we're live streaming this, so welcome anybody who may be watching, and note that we have all committee members present: Alderman Briscoe, Councillor Harvey, Alderman Barakis, Councillor Dutta and Councillor Coates, and myself, and the Director and Manager of Development Appraisal here as well. Thank you, Ms Obi. I'd like to acknowledge that we're meeting on the land of the Muanina people and pay my respects to the Palawa people of Tasmania and pay respects to elders past, present and emerging. So welcome. We have no apologies nor leave of absence. We have no need to co-opt. Confirmation of minutes from the last meeting.
Chairman.
Thank you, Alderman Briscoe. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Item is carried. Indications of pecuniary and conflicts of interest?
Yeah, I'll declare an interest on in reports 8.1.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Any other declarations? No. Do we need to move that, Belinda, or is that? No. Okay, thank you. That's just noted. Item 5 is transfer of agenda items. Are there any transfers? No. Okay. Item 6, Planning Authority items, considerations of items with deputations, and we do have a number of deputations. Can I have somebody move that, please? Alderman Barakis, thank you. Those in favour? Those against? Items carried. Item 7, committee acting as a planning authority, and we'll go to...
Chair, can I just interrupt for a second? I may
Yes.
have to leave at some point if I get a
okay.
text message. So.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you for letting us know, Councillor Harvey. Item 7.1, applications under the Hobart Interim Planning Scheme of 2015. Item 7.1.1, which is 1 Enterprise Road, Sandy Bay, partial demolition and alterations. And we have a representeur, Ms Shirin Ramjan, on behalf of the representeur, Ms Yasmin Ramjan. The applicant coming in as well? Or? There's probably no limit in if we've only got 3 people who we're hearing from, that they couldn't be in this room. Okay, perhaps you can let Rachel know. I think Ms Ramjan? Hello. Hi. Welcome to the committee. Thank you. If you'd like to take a seat. And I'll just introduce the committee so that you're aware now that you're in the room. Alderman Briscoe, Councillor Harvey, Alderman Barakis, Councillor Dutta and Councillor Coates, and I'm Councillor Burnett. All right, so you have 5 minutes to address the committee with your concerns. Thank you.
With the owner of number 3 Enterprise Road, Sandy Bay.
Sorry, 我讲中文可不可以？
So I'm just translating for the manager of number 3 Enterprise Road. 李姐介绍一下自己。
我叫那个 Winnie Song。
Her name is Winnie Song.
我负责3号的那个管理。
So she's in charge of number 3 Enterprise Road property.
那么有关这个项目呢，我提出2个异议。
So she'd like to raise 2 points in relation to this proposal.
第一点是门前的这个挡土墙建造将会破坏原有的坡道自然。 那么这个结构对于自然环境有改变。那么这个挡土墙呢，这个风格和我们这个整体的这个社区的也有不相符。
So the proposed retaining wall in the front yard of the property of the proposed development that's going to modify the natural landscape of the area, and the modern style retaining wall doesn't seem to be blending in very well with the surrounding area, surrounding environment.
那么第二点呢，就是这个规划，建筑门前有比较多的这个材料是使用木材的。那么鉴于我们这个地区属于火灾的高发的地区，所以本着对我们社区和周围旅客的这个安全呢，反对这个项目的建设。
The second point is that we noticed that the part of the proposed development, some part of the proposed development uses timber as a material. Since the proposed development is located adjacent to the Bicentennial Park, which is a fire-prone area, we're just a bit. It's also windy area. We're just a bit concerned about the safety of the surrounding residents and those who visit the park.
谢谢。
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. And so what I'll do is open it to questions from the committee. So we'll start with you, Alderman Briscoe.
Thank you, Chair. So the concern with the front masonry wall is that it isn't in keeping with the natural environment. Is that?
是的。
Yes.
So how would that affect your property?
Because it's adjacent to the Bicentennial Park, it's right next to the park. The
这是一个100年的，所以说是一个古老的风格。那么这个建筑呢，如果建在 CBD， 我们觉得很好。
So because the surrounding environment isn't a very modern style type of structure. So if this type of structure is to be constructed in the CBD, that would be very suitable.
但是这个是一个比较自然的，人家喜欢自然
But the
游
environment
客
is。more natural in that area, and our neighbors like natural environments.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? I just have a question in relation to, is there any problem with runoff or sediment in relation to your property? I can't open my deputations list, so I'm just wondering if you're adjacent, or your sister is adjacent to the property?
Yes, it's adjacent to.
So is there any sort of sediment issues that haven't been addressed in the recommendation?
It's mainly the retaining wall.
建在了那个，好像看它的图纸是建在了我们的这个挡土墙的这个，就是中界线上。但是这个中界线到底是不是我不知道。
这是我们的范围中界线。It seems to be right on the boundary.
我们跟它的这个中界线，但是这个中界线到底是不是中界线？
And we're not 100% sure whether the boundary is accurate. 是不是那个边界的问题 Thank you.
Okay, well, we can ask some of those questions, but Councillor Harvey?
So are we talking about a boundary wall between the properties or the wall at the front of the property?
Between 他说你是讲前面那个墙还是讲我们中间的那个墙的问题
是讲我们1号跟3号。
It's the wall between number 3 Enterprise Road and number 1 Enterprise Road.
Okay, because I can't, is there any, oh, sorry, okay, for the director later. Okay, thank you.
002, I think, site plan probably shows it. Okay, if there are no further questions, if you'd like to take a seat, and we'll try and ask some of those questions, either of the applicant or the director. So if you'd like to take a seat behind, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Wipe the table down, and I'll call you Mr. Sutcliffe. So now we'll hear from the applicant, Mr. Sutcliffe.
Good evening, council members and aldermen. Thank you for your time.
And I wonder if you heard some of those queries in
Yeah.
relation to the retaining wall.
Yep.
Yep, thank you.
Yep. So obviously, I appreciate the comments made, and obviously my full intention is to have good neighbourly relations. Just to address the two matters that were raised, the first one around the natural landscape values. Obviously that wasn't addressed in the actual plan application, which I've since spoke to the draftsman, and we've addressed that. So the plan is to do some softscape, some landscape there on the actual front of the retaining wall to sort of minimise but also retain the values of the area. As far as a streetscape, even this afternoon just doing my own research, it sort of blends very much in line with the current values of the street. So I definitely don't see that being a deterrent, but more so brings in line with what's the current practice within the street. So that's obviously been addressed as far as the performance criteria for the application to be successful. Obviously, part of that criteria will be the requirement to actually do landscaping in front of the retaining wall, which I believe should address the issue around the concerns of the site of the actual retaining wall. And in regards to the drainage concerns, which is sort of mentioned as well. Obviously, it's going to be designed and constructed within the required standards. So drainage itself will be addressed, but there's obviously going to be no further drain off or runoff required. Sorry, there's no further runoff from what's existing there. The only difference is that it will actually be connected into the council's infrastructure. So if anything, it's going to be more directed rather than just having the natural runoff into the side boundary. And the other question raised in regards to the concern around the timber, the actual material that we're looking at using is an actual eco timber, so it's got a BAO 29 rating. So my understanding is that for this deck it needs to have a 12.5 BAO rating, but we've exceeded that with a BAO 29. So we're going for the highest rated timber there, which is obviously satisfies those requirements and above. So in my opinion, I believe all questions raised have been addressed.
Yeah. Okay, good, thank you. I'll open it to the committee for any questions or any further clarification if you require it. Councillor Harvey.
So I think I'm looking at the right image here. I'm looking at page 34, attachment B. So you've got a rendered concrete retaining blockwork colour wallaby along the front and between the properties, or is it just holding up your driveway?
It's both sides, so it's adjacent sides of the current driveway. So now there's just, I guess it's embankment and just root system. So the plan is to do the retaining wall and then just obviously do extended use of that front area as well as the landscaping. So it's both sides of the front of the property. It's not up the actual side of the property, and I think it's set back approximately 3 metres from the actual boundary.
Okay, so you'll have a medium strip or nature strip at the front, then a wall, then your garden, then your house.
Correct.
And on the side property?
No changes.
No changes
No
there.
changes.
Okay. Yep.
Just a question in relation to any sort of overlooking or privacy issues from your perspective.
Yep.
How do you think you'll try and
Look,
reduce that?
so I actually feel that if anything, the privacy is going to be improved for both myself but also the adjacent neighbours. Currently, it's quite exposed, the house. So I've just recently moved into the property with the floor to ceiling windows now. It looks directly into a living space, and because there's no blinds as such, I think with the improvement of the deck there, it'll just give me myself a bit more privacy, but as well as the neighbouring or adjacent neighbours not having to look directly into my living room. So I think if anything to add to it, and whether it makes any difference, but again tonight as well, 15 of the 15 other properties on my side of the street all have balconies as well. So if somewhat that sort of retains the current streetscape as well, it just makes it consistent with the rest of the properties on that side of the road.
All right. If there are no further questions, I'll get you to take your seat again.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And I'll open the item for discussion. Alderman Briscoe?
Yes, look, I know the representative made a mention about the deck being made of timber, but I think that representation, that concern was addressed by the applicant just then, saying it was going to be about 29, which is pretty high. So presumably it's going to be some kind of jarrah or something, spotted gum or something. And the other thing is that part of the conditions the officers have put in, as the applicant pointed out, was to do some landscaping. And I think that addresses the other concern from the representative. So I'm happy to move the recommendation as it's on the books.
Thank you. Further discussion? So, one of the things that was raised, Director, was just ensuring that there was residential amenity, and this obviously it's a steep block. Is there any sort of potential for overlooking or noise carrying from that addition?
Well, none that has any implications under the planning scheme. It's compliant so far as those matters are concerned. It's located at the front of the house already. There are windows in the front of the house already. It doesn't overlook any private open space or the like. So all in all, it's a reasonably compliant proposal.
Mm-hmm. And the high fire protection, or the BAO rating, is good. So how do we know that that is delivered? And is that part of the building permit as it requires?
That's correct. That's a matter that's determined at the building permit stage, not at the planning approval stage.
Okay, so I hope the representatives understood that part of the discussion about the high fire rating for the wood deck and the garage front. Mm-hmm. Okay, so if there's no further discussion, I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? Item is carried unanimously. I think that's a decision of committee. Yep, thank you. Thank you. So we'll move now to 7.1.3, which is 607 to 627 Nelson Road, Mount Nelson. And we have Mr. Hugh Clement from PDA Surveyors to address the committee. Thank you.
I'll just go and get them.
Look, you come off the same boat.
I was the skipper.
Thank you.
Sea Shepherd.
Thank you very much. Hi, Mr. Clement.
Good evening. Thank you.
5 minutes to address the committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. Basically, just like to point out that this application was originally lodged with Council for engineering approval after the permit was gained back in July 2019. Approval from TasWater was gained in August 2019, and there have been significant delays through the engineering approval process for multiple different reasons, partly because of the difficulty with the portal system of lodgements. There have been a couple of times when it's been, even with follow-up from our staff, it's taken 3.5 months to get submissions or documentation that was submitted to the portal actually officially accepted by the portal, which means there's a delay in the staff being able to actually make any recommendations or come back to us with further requests for information. So in effect, there's been about a 6 to 7 month delay just due to those sort of issues. There's also, in the middle of all of this, obviously we've had COVID-19 starting about this time last year or February last year, which has again put delays in both council responses and our responses back to council on this matter. We've basically been working very carefully with council throughout the whole engineering sort of design process, because we acknowledge it is a unique site. It's on the urban fringe of Mount Nelson, obviously. We've not wanted to rush through this like a bull in a gate, and we've taken on board absolutely everything the council officers have asked us to do. And quite often this has required quite a lot of rework in designs to make sure that everything is actually acceptable to all the various council officers, because as you'd be aware with the engineering approval side of things, it's not just a single officer, it's the roads, it's the stormwaters, it's parks, it's everyone. Ourselves and our client have been extremely, I suppose, cooperative with council in trying to ensure that a good outcome is reached by all, and that includes 2 hectares of land which has been earmarked as public open space, and working with council officers to ensure that there would be public access to those that would allow the Centenary Park to be joined up to Nelson Road, which, from my understanding of what some of the parks officers have said, is something that the park lacks, actually having a good road access point at the top of the hill. Apart from Mount Nelson Signal Station, there's no other access into the Centenary Park from that top end, and this subdivision would give that. So there's been significant delays in working all of these issues through. So I can supply a timeline, if you require it, of basically what's been happening the whole way through from July 2019. I can email it to anyone who needs it, but there has been significant work done on this, and it's not something that's just been a one-off application that hasn't been followed through. We've been following this through for 2.5 odd years. So it's basically just the nature of the beast with getting engineering approval in an area that is not so simple, that these things do take time. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for all of that explanation. I'd be certainly interested to see that timeline of things. So I'll open it to the committee for any questions. No questions? Okay, thank you. Right, thank you. If you'd like to take your seat.
Question of the director? Or
Yes,
of
Alderman
the
Briscoe.
officer,
I'll
through you.
open the item for discussion.
Oh, sorry, right, thank you. We have got the power to exercise this discretion to extend the time,
We do.
and it would, irrespective of some of the officers' comments here with the new planning scheme. Yep.
Chair,
Councillor-
I'm inclined to support the officer's recommendation. Circumstances have changed. Planning schemes changed. The biodiversity issues have escalated to some degree with regard to the swift parrot. So I'm inclined to move the officer's recommendation.
Right, thanks, Councillor Harvey. Councillor Dutta?
Thank you, Chair. Just a clarification, if I may, please, with regards to the point made that there was difficulties with the council staff in the communication. Could you just clarify that? And is it usual that these delays take time, or is the 2-year approval given is sufficient, taking into consideration those issues?
Look, there's no doubt that this is a complex site, complex engineering, complex open space needs. And so that, with that, requires, considerable discussion and negotiation around the requirements and ensuring all the conditions of approval are met. So, and there's considerable expense for the applicant for those types of submissions. So it is, there is considerable cost involved and time taken to achieve those. So, look, I appreciate where the applicant is coming from, but the policy, there has been a policy change, and the officers are mindful of that policy shift. So I'm not wanting to necessarily sit on the fence on this one. The policy change is fairly clear, but I do understand where the applicant is coming from.
As a matter of process through you, Chair, so if we refused the extension to night, then the applicant would have to put in a new application? If that was the case, have we got the power, or you have the power to waiver fees?
It would, well, not necessarily, no.
You would not have the power to waiver fees?
But if council were to, council could obviously make that determination.
It seems to me that there could be natural justice here. The applicant has, through the representative, made a few comments to some difficulties they've had with, say, the portal. Obviously, COVID has stepped in as well, and I'm of the feeling that we should refuse it, but waive the fees for the next application, because presumably the applicant will still want to go ahead with a subdivision that meets the new planning scheme or the interim planning scheme. So I'm happy to move that we refuse. Oh, sorry.
It's already been moved by Councillor Harvey.
Oh, I thought you just indicated an opinion.
He moved it, but would you like to add that waiver of...
Oh, yeah, well, if Alderman Harvey would like to...
Can I just clarify? Through you, Chair. Have we ever done this before? Have we ever waived the fees? And what is an indicative cost of it that we would be foregoing?
Look, in relation to the waiving of the fees, I don't know. I have to establish that. Have we waived fees for applicants before? Yes, we have, in certain circumstances.
But that doesn't limit the amount of work we'd still need to do. Our officers would still need to go through the same rigorous process of any application.
Well, I'm happy to move it as an amendment if Alderman Harvey doesn't want to.
I'm just not sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll move it as an amendment.
Okay.
And I take your point, because I think, obviously we don't want to waive all fees, but there might be some that have already been paid that could be waived. So perhaps we could provide advice to the director to look at waiving those fees.
And the discretion of the director which fees are waived. Yeah, but I'm happy to move that as an amendment.
All right, I'd support that as an amendment. Yeah, at the discretion of the director.
Yeah, yeah.
So are you adding that as an amendment?
No, we'll put it as an amendment.
All right, thank you. Councillor Dutton?
So is it okay, is it appropriate to ask, what sort of cost we're looking at? What we're waiving, that's all I want to know.
I'd need to establish that, and I can circulate that information.
But it's tens of thousands, I imagine.
No, well, not for the planning application. There may be other submission requirements with the new application under the new current scheme.
So a lot of that work that's been done, like the flora and fauna surveys, would suffice for another development application?
Well, look, we'd need to establish that, so there could be additional work on top of that. But in terms of the actual application fees, look, I think it's, it'd be under 5,000, I would imagine, but I'd need to check that.
Okay, so I think we get the gist of that. We'll get some advice prior to the meeting. Alderman Barakis.
Thank you, Chair. I suppose any of that information here with this will be going to full council, won't it? This
Yes,
one,
yeah, so it goes to full
Yeah.
council.
Look, I would support the Alderman Briscoe's amendment, but I don't support the substantive motion. I think, look, I'll note what Councillor Harvey said. I think, yeah, look, circumstances change, things do change, but this is something that was compliant with the rules at the time that it was applied for. And, whilst all the things that Councillor Harvey said about biodiversity and the issues we face there having changed, well, so has our demand and our need and the issues that we're having around housing. And we're talking about, something that's pre-packaged for additional housing that we're looking to further complicate, something that's already compliant with the planning scheme as it was when it was applied for. I think what we're looking at doing here is unnecessarily complicating a process and unnecessarily putting more obstacles in the way for a development that would be very, very needed for our community. So look, I don't support refusing this. I think we should be granting the extension of time. I'd be very disappointed if council refused this, but I will be supporting the amendment that if we do refuse it in the end, that we should at least be waiving those costs, because considering.
Okay, thank you. Thanks. Any further discussion? If not, I'll put the amendment. You've got that, Belinda? Yep. Okay, so I'll put the amendment. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? That's carried. It becomes part of the substantive motion. I'll put that. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? So show of hands. Those in favour? So we have... So sorry, you're not in favour of the...
I think Alderman Baraka just convinced me. So
You're easily convinced, aren't you?
I am.
Sorry, we'll just do the count. If you could do the count, please.
Okay, so we've got the Deputy Lord Mayor, Councillor Harvey, Councillor Dutta.
And those against?
Got Alderman Briscoe, Alderman Barakas and Councillor Coates.
So the motion is lost. Do we have another motion?
I'll move that we grant the extension of time as requested.
Thank you. Those in favour?
Sorry. Okay, yeah. And that doesn't include waiving the fees.
Oh, no.
It doesn't
Necessary, because we talk about granting the extension.
Those in favour? Oh, did you want to speak to it?
Just to seek a clarification, Chair, sorry. When we say extension of time, is there a limit or?
19th November.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you. I missed it, sorry.
Through you, Chair, can I just get a clarification of how many extensions this has had? Just remind me. When did it first come to council?
This would be the first one.
So,
Okay.
and I won't be supporting this motion because we have a new planning scheme and this doesn't fit the planning scheme. So why would we give it an extension when we know that this is not acceptable by today's standards? So I think we need to be careful, and we have an opportunity here to make sure that we enforce the planning scheme rather than go backwards to the old scheme. We should be using the latest version.
I'd just like to make a comment, just to remind people that the previous Commission did seek a Part 5 agreement that would have weed management plan, no removal of vegetation, development will be in accordance with minimising the swift parrot collision threat, and the owners maintain a bushfire hazard management area. So there is it's quite a strong Part 5 agreement that was part of the original approval. So it's not as if we're going back in time. We're actually there were some good controls when we had the original approval. And it's sometimes in this case, it's the natural justice element that appeals to me that we should give approval, knowing that there are controls. So I imagine the vote will be 3-3, so we'll go to council without recommendation.
So, one more question,
Councillor
Chair.
Harvey.
So would you be able to get 9 lots under the new planning scheme? What would it minimise or maximise the subdivision as?
Look, I'm reticent to speculate on what could or could not be approved till such time as the assessment was undertaken, full assessment undertaken on the current provisions.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So we had a recent subdivision up in Mount Nelson which had quite a number of lots, or so that, I mean, that seemed like it was possible to have quite a number on a I think, a smaller block of land, but anyway, perhaps we can
Just as a further
hear that, so thank you, Alderman Briscoe, it's just, we might be able to get some information about that.
Well, look, clearly we have concerns with the extension of time because we feel that there might be some deficiencies in the current application. So it does give you some indication that we've got concerns with the current proposal under the current provisions.
Right, thank you. Alderman Briscoe?
Just another condition I read from the previous approval, planning approval ENVS1, which an approved construction environmental plan. No, just reading a number of the elements include mapping showing swift parrot foraging trees, watercourses and drainage lines, demonstrates the vegetation clearing and disturbance must be minimised as far as practicable, and the vegetation soil disturbance with the minimum necessary to facilitate the essential subdivision works, and so on. There's 9 parts of that condition, which to me is quite strong, very strong. So it's not as if there are no environmental concerns in the planning permission that was previously granted.
So I'll put the motion for extension of time. Those in favour?
Aye.
Aye.
Those against? No. Can I have a show of hands, please? Those in favour?
Alderman Briscoe, Alderman Barakis and Councillor Coates.
Those against?
Deputy Lord Mayor, Councillor Harvey and Councillor Dutton.
So that's a tied vote. It will go to council with no specific recommendation, so we'll be hearing this next Monday. Thank you. Thank you for your attendance. Go now to 7.1.2, which is 38A Nicholas Avenue, back at Enterprise Road, and that is for track work. Can I have somebody move that? I think Councillor Harvey was first.
Of course.
Sorry?
That was quick.
Any discussion? No discussion. I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Those against? Items carried. Now we go to Other Hills, 19 Bluestone Rise in Lena Valley. It's dwelling, and this is coming to us because it takes in a skerrick of council land. Alderman Barakis, you happy to move that?
Happy to
Thank
move
you. Any discussion? No discussion. I'll just again it's quite a steep block, so again the retention and or water sediment is moving off that land. That's part of the condition. Natural runoff must be safely conveyed through the site without causing any nuisance to third-party land. And a query about the Part 5 agreement. So the Part 5 agreement, which is listed in advice, so where is it? Yeah, so the Planning Authority consents to the owners not implementing and maintaining the bushfire management plan referred to in Part 5, provided that the submitted bushfire hazard management plan certified by J. Cofield is implemented and complied with. Is that a standard Part 5 agreement?
Yeah, well, I don't know whether Ms. Aiden wants to comment, but what happens is that I suspect that the Part 5 agreement was imposed as part of the original subdivision. Things change, obviously, with the introduction of new buildings, and Cape Lowfield hazard management plan would be drafted in that context. New building, fire rating associated with new building. So.
Okay, all right. Thanks for that explanation. Okay, so that's been moved. Any further discussion? If not, I'll put the motion moved by Alderman Barakis. Those in favour? Those against? Item is carried. Item 8 is reports. 8.1 is the draft Southern Tasmanian Regional...
I'll declare an interest.
...strategy. Thank you, Councillor Harvey. We'll just wait till you leave the room, and I'll invite Ms Turner up to the table. Thank you. We did have a briefing, not that everybody could attend unfortunately, but it was somewhat more explained in more detail by one of the CAT officers. So,
Question?
yeah, Alderman Briscoe.
I saw part of it, or towards the end of that presentation. Seemed like a very good strategy. My question is, Ms Turner's there, right, Ms Turner. Through you, Chair. Whilst saying we're not binding ourselves to actions, but if we did take some of the actions, have we got any idea of the cost? And is it an example of the state government pushing down to the local government expenses which should be taken by the state?
Certainly the concern through you, Chair, is always in the CAT management space is that we have a CAT Management Act that is administered by the state government, and they are increasingly putting out plans that impose an obligation on local government. That being said, the strategy has been drafted with representatives from local government as part of the working group. 11 of the 12 councils are represented on the working group, and they all contributed to drafting of the plan. And if you can see from attachment 2, I've actually done an analysis of the actions in the plan and what we are actually delivering, and we deliver already 32% of the actions, and we could easily deliver another 28% through minor actions such as updating our website. So we could in fact deliver 60% of the actions with no increase in resourcing. The balance, the 40% of actions would require resourcing. However, some of those there's not necessarily a requirement to deliver at the moment to achieve good CAT management. So an example of that is imposition of conservation covenants on new subdivisions that adjoin high land with high biodiversity value. So Kimber is an example of having done that, where there's been a new subdivision near a reserve. They've placed covenants on the land that you can't in fact have a cat as a pet in that subdivision. The land that we're actually having requests to subdivide don't have that same value on them next to high conservation land. So that is not an action that we probably want to deliver or can deliver. So we are actually delivering a lot of the actions in the strategy already. The concern is by adopting it or endorsing it, then we may feel pressure to act, because if other councils are doing the actions in here and we're not, the questions are going to be asked, why is the City of Hobart not doing it when other councils are? But I think that will occur whether or not we endorse the strategy or not. The fact that we already, as I say, can or will be delivering 60% of the actions, and the recommendation with the endorsement is that we endorse it subject to a recognition that it's voluntary and that we will not deliver any more actions unless there's a funding opportunity, I think protects council in that space.
Thank you very much for that, a very detailed answer. Thank you.
Any further questions or comments? So what would be the best outcome to manage cats? So we're talking about domestic and stray cats. What would be the best outcome? Because, you know, I mean, if something's non-binding, it's not necessarily going to be something that's going to have the best outcome.
I mean, certainly there's, through to you, Chair, many difference of opinions about what's appropriate cat management. There is a large sector of the community that thinks that compulsory confinement is the answer to appropriate cat management and would address all the concerns that are in the community about cats. Equally, there's also a large sector of the community that oppose compulsory confinement. An amendment to the Act that's similar to the Dog Control Act, i.e. the requirement to register cats, which then gives local government a revenue stream, and then has provisions in that Act around not even compulsory confinement but soft confinement, similar to what we have with the Dog Control Act. That is, cats could not be at large. Then if they are caught roaming on a neighbour's property, you can fine them, would go somewhat to addressing some of the cat issues. Although I understand that the state government is not willing to look at those amendments to the Act or have considered them and won't.
So essentially, at the moment, is there any revenue with CAT management from a council level? So it's only costs associated with this because it's limited to what we can do.
That's correct. Yes.
CAT Management Act. Where are we up to with public consultation in relation to this position, and what sort of public consultation would there be in relation to, like if we were to endorse without being bound to act?
So there isn't, to the best of my knowledge, a proposal to go out to public consultation. It is a voluntary document that is giving council the option to implement a range of actions that would be consistent with other councils in the southern region. So in that sense, it's up to us whether or not we do them or not. So there's no proposal to consult on the draft plan with the members of the public.
Well, look, I think council needs to determine how far they want to go, and if as has been indicated, if they want to go above that 60%, then that's got to be accompanied by suitable resources to implement that policy. I suppose we as officers can make some recommendations, or in terms of developing what needs to happen or what should happen, but ultimately it's up to the elected members to agree and or fund if that's the case.
And tonight we heard from Tassie Cat Campaign from Nikki as the officer in the briefing, but we haven't actually heard from the peak body, and I mean I think it would be quite useful to hear from the peak body as well in relation to this before we endorse it. So is there a chance to speak to the executive officer of 10 Lives before we go ahead?
Yes, certainly we could extend an invitation to Mr. Hunt to come and talk to council about this strategy. He is a member of the working group and he has had input into the drafting of the strategy. But I'm certainly sure that he would accept an invitation to present to elected members.
I think that would be useful. Certainly from my perspective, to have more of an idea from the peak body as well, despite your good work, but I think it just gives us a bit more of a rounded perspective, and to hear from them as to, like how, because I think they collect quite a lot of the data, don't they, in relation?
Yes, certainly they obviously have cats being surrendered to them, and they have other mechanisms to collect data.
Certainly at the front line.
Councillor Coates?
Look, I would, as presented to us today, I'd be in favour of this, obviously noting that it's not binding. It might be of members' benefit to understand some of the provenance. So last year the Legislative Council debated amendments to the Cat Management Act, and they're still available. There's a whole bunch of submissions that parties made, such as 10 Lives, but also OSVCA, which run a facility up in Launceston, a lot of other governments. I think part of this has probably come about because it's obviously topical. And look, I happen to know that a lot of these things are progressing in a good way. There's obviously certain regions of a state that have issues that we don't have in the city of Hobart. So people always talk about Kingborough because they've got Bruny Island. And that's, we're trying to make that cat free and next to reserves. City of Hobart's predominantly suburbia. There's obviously a huge amount of cost involved if you're going to really heavily police cat management. I'd love to hear from 10 Lives because I'm sure they'll tell us, because I remember them telling it, that the biggest thing is about if you're going to be breeding cats, be an appropriate breeder, otherwise de-sex your cat, and that'll drastically cut down the numbers of wild and feral cats who cause damage. But look, I think what we have in front of us at the moment is ultimately the result of getting a whole lot of interested parties together. You know, it may not go as far as some would like, it's not binding, but I think it does provide council officers with, you know, a very good, if you like, set of desired outcomes. And if we're already doing or can do 60% of it, I think that's great. And then, if you like, it provides this, you know, petri dish where if you get a lot of buy-in from all the councils, and it would appear from the report that other councils are buying into this, it provides that brilliant ability for officers to ultimately look at what Tasman's doing, look at what Glenorchy's doing, look at what Clarence is doing, or they might be looking at what we're doing. And, you know, ultimately, we've all got limited resources. We're not necessarily going to be able to do all things at all times for all people, but I think it would send a good message to the community, and ultimately, hopefully, assist council officers in this space to get better outcomes. And look, you know, we may well decide that it requires more funding. We may get briefings from 10 Lives, we may get briefings from others, but I think that shouldn't necessarily stop us today taking what to me is a good step.
So do you want to move the recommendation? And
I'm
then
happy to move the recommendation.
Have a third point that we invite the Executive Officer from 10 Lives to address the committee?
Yep, more than happy.
Any further discussion? Okay, thanks, Ms Turner. If there's no further discussion, I'll put that motion. Those in favour? Those against? Items carried unanimously. Can we call Councillor Harvey back in, please? No, it's not there? Okay, all right, so we'll move ahead. So 8.2 is the delegated decision report. Can I have somebody move that? Thank you, Alderman Briscoe. Those in favour? Those against? Items carried. Item 8.3 is the City Planning Advertising Report. Alderman Barakis. Ms Abbey, is there anything on there that you wanted to raise?
Yes, there are two major developments on the list this evening. The first is for 79 Collins Street and the second is for 98 Argyle Street. So two proposals there which have both been through UDAP. Will be perhaps not on the next round but the round after, I suspect.
And 43 Pyrie Street, which is demolition 6 multiple dwellings, is that former Flint House, and is that a change, is it likely to be a change of use as well?
I'm not sure of the property. I'm told it's a three-storey, 5-bedroom dwellings, 6 of them. So so far only one representation. So at this stage, likely to be delegated decision, but there is still further time in the advertising period.
All right, thank you. Alderman Barakis moved this, so I'll put that. Those in favour? Those against? Items carried. Item 9 is response to questions without notice. And we have a number there, so you're happy to move all of them?
All of them, yes. Yep.
Thank you. Those in favour? Those against? Items carried. Item 10 is questions without notice. Do we have any questions without notice? Councillor Dutta.
Can I just put a caveat to this? You know, if this question is going to in any way prejudice the council, then I won't ask now, but later. But It's with regards to do, with the development application for the cable car.
Depend on the nature of the question, Chair. But,
Yeah. Okay.
to be safe, it could be asked and closed.
Okay, thank
And
you.
we can move it back into open if it's,
Okay.
if it's
Thank you.
any sensibilities. Okay, I have a couple of questions, just in relation to the issue around, that was raised by the representative in relation to the portal. Are we, can you direct a report on any likelihood of or perceived problems that that you have had with access to the portal or representations going to the right department for planning matters?
I'm happy to take that one on notice, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions? If not, I'll move item 11, the closed portion. Can I have somebody move that, please? Alderman Briscoe. So we'll those in favour? Those against? It's carried. So we'll close this open portion of the meeting and